Sweet. Hello, is that one not here yet? We may or may not be muted.
No, I can hear you guys.
Oh, okay, sweet. Thanks. I think Zetlin's going to run the show today, so we're just waiting for him.
Jordan's background. Reminds me of
Good morning, everybody. / afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Like calling for the Bahamas.
Yeah, you are actually very loud.
Oh no, too loud.
That's all right. It might just be us.
I actually can't hear Zetlin at all.
That might be the first time anyone of being too loud.
Oh, that's actually better.
Cool. So not too loud anymore?
Sounds good.
Loud enough.
All right. So who do we have on the call? Unfortunately, I did not do enough preps promotion, but I know we have Jordan and Todd and Artyom. Thank you very much for coming. I think we may wait for another couple of minutes to see if we've got some kind of a quorum. What do you think of that, guys?
Cool.
Okay.
Saw John Wick 3 last night.
Was it amazing?
It was a John Wick movie, that's for sure.
Good. I want to see it. I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to see that movie.
Yeah, exactly. My wife and I used to go to movies like
Oh, you know what we never confirmed?
we
never confirmed, Tommy? Do you feel ready to talk about your PR for category stuff? It was just an idea, but I'm finalizing the agenda. I wanted to make sure that there was nothing on here that shouldn't be.
Sure, I could definitely do that. It'll demonstrate kind of the theme of what we'll be presenting for the next several weeks with books refactors. It's not
Exactly.
I think it's pretty. It's really pretty. The code looks a lot nicer and easier to understand, and gets some stuff into paragraphs.
It really does. It's excellent code. It's excellent code. That's kind of why I wanted to show it. And Andy, kind of the same question about the product page.
Yeah, I was going to say mine's kind of not nearly as cool as Tommy's, so I don't have much to say about mine. It just refactors it from a class to a...
Well, we don't have to do 2 of those updates.
Yeah, well, wait, I'll defer mine to Tommy.
Okay.
The mini cart, though, that's coming up next time. Whew, that's a big hamburger.
And you have to enable SSH every time you switch now.
Oh, man, really?
Boy, I'm getting really bad connection here.
Every day.
I don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
It's because I left the internet.
Yeah.
Thanks.
To like get fetch and push and all that stuff. You have to do that? Seriously?
Are you connecting to the neighbor's Wi-Fi?
I know I did something so that it just
automatically. Somebody posted something. Yeah, I remember that. I didn't do that. Somebody posted something basically every time I open their shell.
HTTPS instead of SSH.
Maybe that's
yes.
Maybe that's what I did because I don't use SSH. I don't really use SSH right now at work, so just for GitHub I can use it.
Like we were talking about something, but I don't remember what it was.
Not having time to go to the movies for the kids.
That's right. Yeah.
At least not together.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. We never got to the point where we like went just by ourselves. But
I used to be by myself all the time. It was great.
Should definitely do that.
Go to restaurants, go to movies. Yeah, my wife wants to go with me. Oh, we're recording?
It's actually publicly broadcasted too. She's watching right now.
And I forgot my wedding ring today.
Hey guys, I'm having Having some problems with connectivity, like, of course I am.
Gotta get that Google Fi.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
And now you can hear me again?
Yep.
Yeah.
I have been struggling for the last several minutes, and my community updates wiki page has been blanked because, of course, it has. So just give me 1 minute to reconstitute it, okay?
All right.
Okay, we're going to do an Imagine recap with Salmia first. Salmia, do you think you're ready to do that?
Samia was here. I don't see her anymore.
I'm here. I just had someone come in the room, so I turned off the video.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, that's all right. That's all right. I can talk a little bit about configuration management.
No, I can go. Not a problem. I'm
Okay,
ready.
all right.
Yeah.
All
Hi,
right. Do you have
everyone.
screen
Good
sharing to do, or do you want to just chat about what happened in Imagine last week?
Last week, yes.
It all runs together.
Seems longer, but yeah. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone in the various time zones. Hope everybody's had a good week. This was the first time I attended Imagine, and it was a really great experience to be able to meet so many people in the community and have direct interaction and conversations about products that we work on. We're relatively cocooned, in the Austin office, and especially meeting merchants is not something that happens every day. So it was kind of nice to get some perspective on that. My main goal from a user experience standpoint going into Imagine, and the team has heard some of this before, so I apologize for repeating, especially since you're also going to get a deep dive recap next week. But the main goal was to sort of gauge the perceptions of the product out in the wild, like what people think about it. Is it being communicated the right way? And then sort of the assumptions that we make about agencies in the community or merchants on adopting technology like this, is that valid? And also to get some understanding around theme, how people think about building a storefront. They think about it in terms of components, in terms of page layout, like what is their theme customization like? So that was one part of it. And the other part of it was we had a lab where I actually got to observe people using the tooling and doing the setup and going through some finite tasks, which was great. So we ran a survey. It was kind of a me in person with the survey on a tablet, taking it around to folks and having conversations with them before or after they filled out the survey. And I think that it was nice to kind of realize that there is definitely excitement and desire for the type of improvements that we would be bringing to Magento's front end, and the fact that people will have a greater level of flexibility in customizing that. It was also nice to see people being able to go through the lab tasks with relative ease. There were some common issues that popped up for folks, but of course, Jimmy and Zetlin were on hand to help and sort of put up the solutions live, and it was nice to kind of see that interaction. I was also part of a site reviews activity where we had sort of approved people who were interested in having their sites reviewed from a user experience standpoint to come and meet with certain members on the team. And it was fantastic to realize that there's an overwhelming kind of need and desire for people, or for merchants. They want that kind of UX voice because not all of them have somebody like that on the team. A lot of them have visual designers or UI designers, but they do look to Magento or the Magento UX team to kind of put out best practices and recommendations on how their sites can be improved. So those conversations were really valuable. We were able to send out kind of a report to them, and then we had the opportunity to schedule a follow-up conversation. And between the survey and the lab and the site review sessions, we've generated about like 100+ leads between merchants and agencies to be able to have conversations with. And my objective going forward is to build more knowledge and expertise in sort of the shopper experience realm. And it's really vital to have folks such as yourself, Jordan, and Artem, like, conversations with folks like you that do this every day, so that when we put out, any features for Venia or even the component library, that we're able to sort of factor in the user experience problems that you all are trying to solve, backed, of course, with all of the wonderful research that's out there. I'm currently just reading a really exhaustive report by Nielsen Norman on e-commerce UX best practices. So I think there's just what came out of Imagine is that, yes, we've done a few things, and we've done a lot in some areas, but there's still lots more to be done and achieved. And to know that we have the supportive community to do that is really fantastic. And everyone is so open and willing to provide feedback that I was really glad I was able to attend the event and make some of those connections and bring these readings back to the team. The survey results and so on are unfortunately sort of a closed set of information that I can't share out to public just yet. But when I'm able to, I certainly will try to bring that into one of our future community meetings once the team has had a chance to digest all of that information. So that's my recap.
Is David on the call?
Am I on the call? Are you asking if I'm on the call?
I didn't know if he dropped.
No, I didn't. Yeah, well, I guess because I had connection problems before. Thank you very much, Salmia. I really appreciate the sort of ad hoc update. And I, too, was at Imagine and agree with everything you've said. We certainly had, in general, like a lot of insights from people, some of which we expected because we were sort of adjusting our approach and talking about that, and some of which were real surprises to us. So, Eric and I and Jimmy, who was also present, we kind of collect our personal experiences. But Salmia is going a little further and collecting real data, and really appreciate it. Well, I do have an agenda that I can share. You guys want to? We'll do a little screen share that I had to reconstitute. Can you guys see the agenda that I have vaguely laid out?
Yep.
Great. Okay, I'm going to start recording minutes on these, and I'll just quickly review what Samia said later. But it looks like what's up next is a category page hooks review with Tommy. And for just some context, there is a pull request open that is right on the way into develop, where, as we are going to do with the rest of Venia, Tommy has refactored the category page so that instead of using class components, it uses the new functional components with hooks paradigm that React uses that we're going to enable for all of you with Peregrine. So, Tommy, you want to take it?
I'll take it.
All right.
Let's see. Right, let me know when you can see my screen. Very dark. All right, so this is, as James hinted at, I'm calling it a simple refactor because as much as possible, I try not to introduce any new functionality. So this is really just the category page here that is just a product list, but we call it a category page. So you'll see here that all of it is still functional, pagination still exists, and a lot of the functionality that was previously there is still there. Nothing has really changed in the UI except for a little smoother scrolling there when you navigate between pages. So on to the refactor. One pattern that you're going to see is when we identify functionality that we predict that would need to be shared between components, we're going to pull it out into custom hooks. So pagination was one of those hooks. So you'll see here that that simple pagination functionality that was previously in Redux, we pulled out, put into this use pagination hook. So the two pieces of state there that we're keeping track of are current page and total page. We memoize and export our state guide. And then you'll see that used here in the category component now. So you'll see I don't know if a diff makes sense here, but you'll see nothing's going to change. Like we removed the class declaration, and now it's just a functional component. We extract props instead of all the prop type and default prop stuff will now be at the bottom of the declaration. And then all the functionality now is just converted over to using hooks. So you'll see, as advised by the React team, all of your hooks should be declared at the top level of your functional component. So we have our pagination hooks here. We decided to keep this piece of API for page control that gets drilled down to the pagination component itself. But ideally, this will be refactored out at some point too. This is us using our brand new hooks from Peregrine for using the GraphQL query API. So this is kind of how you gain access to those pieces of functionality. Instead of wrapping your component in a query component, it's now using the hooks-based API. And then this is kind of how you fetch data now. This will be the pattern for fetching data. You have an effect that you want to run as soon as the component renders. We also have some dependencies here that'll refire this hook. And then we just kind of set our state. Like anything else in React, you just set state, and then your component should react. So that's what we're doing here with loading data. This is also where we declare our scroll behavior. And then our component itself gets really simple. So we run through the different states that we want to handle and then render out what makes sense there. So here it's just either we didn't get data, we're still loading, or we have our data and we can go ahead and render our category content component here. So in this same vein, since this was contained inside of the category root component, we also refactored this guy. But this one, you'll see, was much simpler because it really wasn't doing anything besides taking props and rendering. So this was just removing classify, using the classify or the merge classes hook that we added there, and then changing it to a functional component. And then one tiny piece that we were able to do, so there's total pages now is available in the GraphQL API. Previously, we were manually calculating this, so I went ahead and added this to the GraphQL call, and then we just use that in our category component to kind of trigger state updates. Here. There, this effect here. So that's it. Any questions?
So all the new hooks are going to be part of Peregrine?
That's the pattern we've been going with, right? Like most of the hooks we're writing have been functionality migrated into the Peregrine.
Okay.
Behavior is going to be in Peregrine.
Yeah.
So pagination behavior there, query behavior in Peregrine. And then I think the idea is that we're going to just write a bunch of functional components and see what kind of patterns emerge. And then once we see like very reusable pieces of code, that's what's going to get moved to Peregrine as well.
So this will enable developers that want to start from scratch, storefront, to just extend those functionalities into their own concept store. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
And I mean, this really demonstrates too how like you can start using Peregrine as your only dependency as well, and then you kind of decide on what your component markup looks like.
Awesome.
All right, and these Peregrine hooks are actually coming up in our 3.0 release. So that search component that was demoed a while ago by Jimmy contained a lot of this backing functionality for the query API and all that. So with 3.0, you can start experimenting with hooks. And then very shortly after that, we should have a very exciting release that starts getting a lot of these refactors in there. You can start seeing how you can write or refactor your own components to start using these hooks. James, back to you.
All right. Well, does anybody, first of all, have any questions? I don't see any in the chat, but just in case somebody has one they'd like to spit out. I know that my notes are extremely simple, but
I like it. We should.
it's actually hard for me to write simply. It's actually very difficult for me.
Have we kept meeting notes before? This is great.
No, this is a thing we're trying to do. We need to sort of lay down some train tracks for the things that we've talked about. For instance, I asked Stephen, like, hey, you want to talk about toasts? And he said the toasts are burnt. We talked about the toasts last week, and had we the minutes, we would have known that. So, folks, we're keeping these minutes now in the GitHub Wiki. We're trying to use the GitHub Wiki a little bit more because it's completely public and because people can propose edits and comment on it. And actually, can't comment on it, but you can propose edits on it in general. So the next thing that we have is to talk a little bit about configuration management. So I just want to, first of all, point you guys to the pull request that involves this. So this is some me code, which there ought to be less and less of this, but this is some stuff that I put out as part of the project to create the Create PWA CLI that we had from last 2 weeks ago that I prepped for Imagine. So the idea behind the unified system for environment-based configuration was based on the fact that our configuration was kind of all over the place. So I have a little file which is meant to kind of review this, and that's not what it is at all. Sorry. I guess it's down here in drafts. Yeah. No, it's not. Okay. Oh, wait. There it is. Gotcha. I've already received some feedback I have not reviewed. But yeah, so configuration management that we were doing up to this point was kind of all over the place. But the plan from now on is to use environment variables as much as possible. And there's some explanation for why we want to do that here. The main reason is just that environment variables work everywhere. You don't have to keep teaching people how to set things and override them in some special way. And we want to have a consistent namespace for our environment variables. So what we eventually hope to have is an experience where when you run the project install, whoops, and then you run a project build, it should tell you a few things about your local environment variables. Because you probably already have a .env file, and that .env file probably already has some variables in its set, and you kind of know what they do. So if we're going to migrate and use different variables, it's important for us to tell you. If we're centralizing these variables, it's important for us to kind of let you know what's changing. And there you go. This isn't super visible in my shell, so let me see if I can't change my custom color profile since my colors are so stupid.
We also can't see your shell, James.
Oh no! Because I am the worst. Let me switch over to my shell here. And here. Boy, this is the best. Okay. Can you guys see my shell now?
Yes.
Yes.
I expected to be narrating the process of a yarn install and build during that time, but you might see that in this branch with configuration management, it checks the env file and then logs some new developments in our environment variables and settings. And the most pertinent ones are that some of the names have changed. Now, we haven't changed these names for random reasons. We are trying to approach a sort of a namespace type of thing. Some of these environment variables are really long. Typing them is really long. And in your code, you don't want to constantly doing process.env. Giant variable everywhere. So what we've done is come up with a configure environment function. And when you run configure environment, you receive this configuration object that's capable of producing custom, convenient JavaScript. Call it and say, look in this namespace, it will produce an object that looks like this. And this is something consistent now throughout the code base, something that you can use. And we haven't changed all of our tooling to pass arguments to each other based on this new system. But the basic idea behind it is that you always want to use the outer function to pass configuration to an interdependency. And what that means is the entry point of a program is where you should do it. So in the pull request that we have open, which is not this one, you might notice back config that one example change is that instead of manually checking these manually specified unpredictable environment variables, configuration should be done. Use the project config and retrieve sections from it for dev server, image service, and custom origin. And what that produces is an object that the PWA dev server then uses. You can see that it receives an object called dev server origin, an object called image for image service, for instance. Passes that into image opt middleware while appending another setting. And in add image opt middleware, you can see that we now expect to retrieve configuration directly from a nicely formatted configuration object, rather than have everything throughout the entire project continue to parse environment variables. Parsing environment variables manually throughout the project is nice because it allows for broad and down to specific configuration of individual functions from outside, but it is very annoying to do, and it requires that you remember longer and longer namespaced environment variables. So what we do here is we use the automatic namespacing feature, actions, dev server, image service, custom origin. It's pulling out just those portions and then namespacing them so that dev server service worker enabled becomes service worker camel case. So all of these are now specified in an env definitions JSON file. And we are still kind of working on where this thing should be stored. But because BuildPack and PWA Studio are meant to be building a kind of standard environment between projects, we wanted to have a place where it was stored in the PWA Studio code base what the current expected environment variables are. So here's what they are. And you can see that in this manifest, we specify sections, we specify the actual individual variables, we add defaults if they're appropriate, and we even add type signatures. And the configure environment function will read from here, use defaults, and then read from your .env file, and then read from the local environment. And then if there are any problems, if you are using any deprecated environment variables, there's a section down here for specifying change. So if the example for something changed, give the update and explain why. Since an environment variable like this has changed to custom origin enabled, then you can explain why, and then when reading the environment variable file, it's still going to work. We have backwards compatibility, though we log a deprecation warning. So this proposal is for usage, again, in the outer S, where now you pull in the
James, you're cutting out a lot.
config object. spit it out. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
I was just saying, you've been cutting out like a lot, like
Right near the end there.
yeah.
I think we got the gist of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, there is a document to read. Do you hear me there?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. And if anyone has concerns or questions about centralizing our configuration management this way, now would be a great time. I'll stop sharing because that might.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we have an open bug right now where our build is not consumable because it contains some environment variables itself. Does this resolve that bug?
Where the build is not consumable because environment variables have been encoded into it?
Webpack injects certain environment variables into our build right now, yeah.
Oh yeah, so right now the default is to inject all of those environment variables into our build. But the way that that works is that there isn't suddenly a file full of these environment variables, but instead any direct references to those environment variables are actually transpiled into literals. So when you say portable, like when you generate bundles, then they're going to use and hard code environment variables from your environment. So we try not doing that very much because that each time you do that, it makes the bundle like less portable. But
Right.
it is something that you sometimes want to do. So the open bug is, what's the bug that's open?
I think it's about payment issues. Our published package does not have some environment variable in it, causes an issue. But not a highlight of this at all. Does this just change our expectation that all environment variables are runtime and not build time?
Oh, our expectation needs to be actually clarified on that point, I think. Yeah. So inside the JavaScript bundle, environment variables are all available at build time. So if you cite an environment variable inside a build the way that we do in Braintree, and I guess I can show that off here. Hold on a minute. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, can you see code?
Yep.
So you can see that in here, we actually refer to process.end.checkout Braintree token. So we've changed this variable name. Can you guys hear me all right, or have I started to cut out because I'm screen sharing?
Good so far.
Okay, good. So process.end.checkout Braintree token will actually get turned into the Braintree token. So it defines this thing as a literal on this line and then passes it on later. Pack build time, which means that the bundle that is built should be only usable for a specific deployment of Magento, which is what we expect. If we want to reuse bundles, and we do eventually want to reuse bundles between deployments and systems, so we may end up taking things like this and embedding them in some other way, maybe spitting them out of some dynamic system or embedding them as JSON. So that's why that particular thing is happening. But I am not familiar with the issue you're talking about. Is it missing environment variables in published build, opened by some troublemaker named Tommy? Okay, sharing the screen so you can see. If any has a sole dependency installed. Okay, so we probably are going to need to, or the environment variable plugin.
Yeah, we're losing you again.
Actually, something that the create PWA. Is this better?
Yeah.
No? Hello?
I guess not. We can hear you now.
Okay. the dependency that we have on the environment plugin in Webpack, it hard codes those things, and it only, I think, does so for current project code. The upcoming Create PWA CLI, I'm pushing some changes to it soon where it starts to try and compile like third-party code as well, and so if the Braintree drop-in turns into third-party code, then that should get used. But I think that's what's missing, is just cross-compiling from your node modules folder as well.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious if the Vinia bundle was going more towards a bundle that can be shared, like you hinted at. But it seems like there's still some additional steps to be taken.
Oh yeah, I hinted at that when ready for prime time. Things in there that way. Just trying to think about it. No other questions? Okay. Well, I can talk.
We're losing you again, James.
I think it's just messing with us.
You think he's messing with us? Like, and the most exciting thing.
And last but not least.
One more.
So he's sharing content, but we can't hear him anymore. Maybe he should just type.
Type what you want to say.
Yeah. Or not.
Hold on just a minute.
Actually, not a bad way to do it, because then, even if it's buffering, it'll come through. You didn't see him in here yesterday? Oh, we're being recorded. Oh, yeah, someone did it. Sorry, but I just left the meeting. Poor guy. What's going on with his internet? I feel like this is a recurring issue for him.
Leaky pipes, terrible internet.
Yeah.
Can't catch a break.
Was there anything left on the agenda? Just we have like 5 minutes left, anyways. Or do we have is this an hour meeting or?
No, I think
45 minutes, right?
Yeah. Layered navigation, facet GraphQL. He did have another agenda item.
Cool. So we got 5 minutes for him to go over those things, if he comes back.
Yeah.
Is he on Slack?
probably just call it.
Yeah.
You should use dial lane next time.
All right.
Yeah, I think we should just call it because don't know where he is. There's only 5 minutes left. Did anyone on the call have anything to share? No? Okay. Oh, wait, he's back. He's back.
Everyone leave.
Everyone leave. Hi, James. Maybe we should just message him.
Plain old telephone service.
What?
Using plain old telephone service. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So I apologize for this. I think this is a final warning to me not to try and run community syncs while working from home. So I apologize for that, guys. Still hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Did you want to cover the last agenda item, the layered nav and the GraphQL?
Yeah, I'd love to. But since I'm calling in, I'm not gonna be able to share. So if somebody wants to share screen and just go to the layered navigation PR, all that I wanted to do was say, hey, there's a layered navigation PR open. We had one of our most beloved community members working on it, but he's gone to pursue another opportunity, and we don't imagine that he's going to have a lot of free time to work on this. So I wanted to put it to the assembled that we would love to have some help. And if anyone has some interest in or already some familiarity with this work to add filtering, faceting to category displays and search result displays, lists of products, then we would be really appreciative, and you get lots of points if you took it on. And if you're not familiar with it, then you can talk to me in Slack or otherwise, and we can bring you up to speed.
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's not really much.
I got 120 comments on it already. Pretty hefty PR. All right.
All right. Sounds like everybody on the call will be assigned to it. Let's do it. Absolutely. That was all. I didn't want to talk about it in great detail. I want you to know that the GraphQL team approached us yesterday to ask if what the GraphQL API currently provides is enough to do a rich interface. And if not, can we make suggestions to them? So we can do that. We can open issues both from our community and from our core team against the GraphQL CE repository. And so we can work with the GraphQL team to get to an amazing faceting experience. And that's it. That's all the update I have for that. And now we can have the open floor. We only have a few minutes left, but I would love to just spare that time to anybody who wants to bring up something we have not yet discussed.
The new method.
Not everybody at once. Okay, well, thank you very much, folks. We will see you next week, I believe, with another update, unless there's some sort of American holiday. We will keep you up to speed on that. And get ready for some other webinars and kind of out of the normal schedule, special events to talk more about some of our stuff.
Sounds good.
If that's it, I guess that's it. I think we can be done.
I think
Right,
Jordan's
yes.
gonna say something. He's mentioned if we can hear him in chat, but we can't.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. I can't actually see the chat because I'm just called in on the phone.
Not gonna read the question.
Read it, James. Timothy.
He just asked if we could hear him. We can't hear you, Jordan.
Yeah, you guys can hear me?
Now
Oh,
we
yeah.
can.
Oh, now you can. Not really a question, but if there's a minute left, I can show you what I made today or what the team made today for our custom project, if you like.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, please do.
Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. So you've probably all seen our custom project before, and we've been building a better mobile menu than we had before. So for desktop, it's just a really simple, we call it the mega menu. But for mobile, it's pretty, should probably start the, it's still loaded. So it's basically the same drawer, but we did some meaningful transitions in it. So you can actually see the data switching at the top. And just really, I think it's a funny menu, and I thought maybe it's worth showing. So, but I guess Sumia is not here anymore. Would love to have her feedback on.
Oh, she will definitely want to deliver it. She will definitely want to deliver feedback.
Right. Yeah, okay.
But
sure.
She's not here right now. No, yeah.
That's awkward. Anyhow, that's what I wanted to show you guys.
Cool. That looks really
It's
good.
not awkward at all.
No, I mean the error. You guys not see it? Or?
We saw it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not awkward at all.
Jeez.
Errors, it's fine.
Anyhow, yeah. So basically, that's it. I'll ask Sumya if she can give me some feedback on a UX point of view.
Cool.
Very cool.
Well, thank you very much, Jordan. If anyone else has
You're welcome.
questions, something to volunteer. Okay. Thanks again for your attendance and for your patience with my connectivity problems. Again, this will be the last time I try to run one of these remotely. I'll just come to the office a bit earlier and change some plans around. So thank you very much, and I will see all you guys next week and some of you guys in the next hour.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Stand up, oh, jeez.